So we're going to finish out 8.6 today. That's the last section on our test 3. And then we'll review Monday for that test 3. So I'll open that all up next week. And then that Wednesday, we'll start 9.3, which will be our material for our last test. All right, also the last section, 8.6, is polynomial inequalities. So I'm gonna, in this section, when we write our answers, they want them in interval notation. So I'm gonna refresh y'all on a few things. In interval notation, if you got equals under your inequalities, you got to use the brackets. And then if it's just a greater than or less than, we're going to use parentheses. Now remember, infinity and negative infinity always use the curve in parentheses, okay? All right, so I'm going to put up here, first off, is my steps for solving polynomial inequalities. Remember, these inequalities, greater than and less than, they can have many answers on these, okay? So, really the first thing you want to do is get that polynomial on one side equal to 0. So get all terms on one side and equal to 0. Now, I will say there's only one of these in here that I might not want to get a 0 on the right side, and that's because it's missing the x term in the middle, and there's easier ways to solve it. So when I get to that, and I'll show y'all, you can do it either way on that one, okay? All right, so we get everything on one side equal to 0. I'm then going to solve for the variable. Now, since these are quadratic with x squared in them, you're going to get 2 answers, okay? So I'm going to set up a number line using the 2 solutions. Okay, so I'm going to set up my number line. This one will sort of look like this, and then I'll have my 2 solutions on there, okay? So the trick on this, when you set that number line up with those 2 solutions you got, you want to find a test point to test, okay? And what I mean is, I'm going to get either a number in between my 2 solutions or on either side of my solutions. I'm going to test that and see if it's true or false, okay? So choose a test point. If your test point is true, then shade that region. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the 2 possible outcomes on those shades. if my test point was in between A and B and it was true, then I would shade that area in between. Now, the other possible outcome would be if I tested that test point in the middle and it was false. If it's false in the middle, then you're going to shade the outside edges. Okay, so when you get two answers, it's going to be one of those two scenarios, okay? Now, if you end up with this one, your answer will be just a simple interval from the A to the B. Now, it could be in brackets if I get equals on that, but it's only going to be in between that your interval is going to come from. If it's this form, it'll go from negative infinity to your A, then you'll union from your B to a positive infinity. Okay, you shade the middle, you're going to get the one interval. You shade the outsides, you're going to get two intervals with a union in the middle of them. But what if I solve this and I get a repeating answer, like an x minus 5 and an x minus 5? Those would both give me a positive 5 for my answer. So if you do get a repeating answer, then that is the only number we exclude from the domain. So if you get something like that, it's going to look like negative infinity to that number, union that number to a positive infinity. So when you only pick out one number, it's going to be the one that you're unioning around on that, okay? There's one more case. If the polynomial does not factor, then we get what we call no solution. So here's the thing, if you're using that calculator to solve the quadratic parts of this, and you get any answers that are not integers, so what I mean, if you get radical looking answers, or you get imaginary answers, it's going to be a no solution, okay? So on the quad, when you use it, you want numbers like 2 and 3, -1 and 5, something like that on it, okay? If you get them crazy looking decimals, then you might as well say no solution. All right, y'all, so I'm going to start doing some of these examples. And the only thing that change up on it really is the equations you're solving. Now, they're all going to be quadratic. And you can technically use the quad formula for every one of these, okay? I'll probably factor mine just to get y'all a little better at factoring if you ever want to be good at factoring, I guess. Because if your battery's go dead on your calculator, you're sort of messed up, okay? Always bring backups for those. And there's like 7 of these on your homework, so it's not too bad. I'm glad this section sort of ended this test 3 material, because it's a little laid back compared to that section 4 and 8.4 and 8.5. Ooh, that was crazy. So we're going to solve the following inequalities. number one, it has got parentheses, x minus 4 and x plus 2, all that less than 0. So let me tell you what they did on this one. This one, they've already factored it for us. So they're not starting at the very beginning on it. They're already starting where it's already been factored. Just to get you good on that, and then now start from scratch and we'll have to do everything. So since it's already factored, I will take both of these factors and set them equal to 0. And I just use the equal signs because at that point, I'm not worried about that less than and greater than stuff until I start looking at my intervals when I make my timeline, okay? I mean my number line. All right, so let me solve these by adding 4. So this gives me x equals a positive 4, and then subtract 2 from the second one, and I get x is a negative 2. So I got my 2 answers. I'm going to set up my timeline now. So let's see, negative 2 would come first, and then my 4. So the number I always pick to test is 0, because it's the easiest to multiply, the easiest to add. So I know that 0 is going to be in between the negative 2 and the 4 here, right? So what's going to happen? If it becomes true when I put 0 into this, I'm going to shade that. If it's false when I put the 0 in up here, I'm going to leave that alone and shade those outsides, okay? So you got 1 or 2 choices on them shadings, unless you get the single repeating answer, and then it's going to do like we said with the infinities. So to test for 0, you would put a 0 in for these x's. So I got 0 minus 4 times 0 plus 2 has got to be less than 0. We always say it's a negative 4 for the first parentheses times a positive 2. So that's going to be negative 8 is less than 0. True or false? That is true. So since this is true, we're going to shade that where the 0 is located. 0 is right in the middle, so I'm going to shade that middle section. Now, y'all, since I shaded the middle section, there's no way we're going to shade the outside section, because on these, it's either the middle or the outsides get shaded, okay? So now, all we got to do is write this answer in interval notation like I did right there. There's no equals on this, so it's going to be parentheses. And then my numbers will be what? Negative 2 for the left side. And then positive 4 on the right side. Well, not too bad, are they? Probably easier than doing 8 times. Asymptote stuff, remember? Now, I will say this. If you was to graph this, oh, where was my answer? It's negative 2 here, and over here at 4. Since this is less than 0, remember the x-axis is 0 for the y's. What would happen is the part from negative 4, from the negative 2 to 4 would be on the bottom, this interval, and then the rest of this would be up there. So if you look at it on the graph and it's less than, you're only looking for the part of the graph that's under the x-axis. If it was greater than, then I would have these 2 intervals, which would look like the one with the union in the middle. Okay, so you can sort of graph them and get an idea of what part's less than or greater than. All right, how about it? X squared minus 13x plus 40 is greater than 0. So if you hit it with quad, it'd be a 1, negative 13, 40. Quad would spit out your answers, okay? Now when I'm solving it, I'm just going to set it equal. So the first thing on factoring would be to figure out what two signs are going in the parentheses. So here's what I look at. This last number tells me most of what I need to know. Anytime that's positive, both of these factors will have the same sign as that middle number. So they're both going to be negative. Now, if that 40 would have been negative, then I'd have had one positive and one negative automatically, okay? So now all I need are my factors of 40 that equal 13. 8 times. So to count you, I'm going to have to get numbers bigger than 13 anyway. Because I know Arkansas quits at 12 times 12, so I get y'all with the 13s maybe. Now, if you notice at this point, it looks like how they started this one. So we'll just solve this thing. Set both of them equal to 0. So it looks like I'll get a positive 8 on my first one. And a positive 5 on the second one. So y'all, our little interval, let's see, 5 would come first, and then my 8. I'm still going to test 0, and I'll show you on this one why I love zeros, okay? But I do know that 0 is going to be in this first section. So here's your choices. If this is true, then we're going to shade the first section, and we'll skip, and then we'll shade the last section. If this is false, we're only going to shade the middle. Now watch this. The reason I use a 0, because I can go back to this original equation, and x squared is going to be 0, right? 13 times 0 is going to be 0. So I'm going to have 0 squared minus 13 times 0 plus 40 has to be greater than 0. So y'all, is that true or false? That is definitely true. So since that's true, I'm going to shade that section where the 0 was located. 0 was located in my first section. Since I shaded the first section, I skip the middle section and I shade the last section. So now all we do is put this in interval notation. So you're going to start over here at negative infinity until you hit that 5. Notice there's not an equals under this, so it's going to be the curvy parentheses. Then you're going to union, curvy parentheses, go from the 8 to a positive infinity. And that's why I draw the number lines when I do these, because your interval is only the shaded part. And you're done. So if you got one shaded part, you only have one interval without the union. When you got the two shaded parts, then you want to have two intervals with a union on those, okay? But notice any point on here, when you got all them polynomials on one side, you can hit it with the quad. Now, they're not going to give me everything on one side and a 0 on the other, right? So what they did now, they put me at x squared plus 7x minus 22 is greater than or equal to x minus 6. So where the x minus 6 is, I really need a 0 on that side. So what I'm going to do is subtract the x from both sides, and I'm going to add the 6 to both sides. So basically add the opposites to both sides so that we get an x squared. Oh, what's that? 6x minus 16 is greater than or equal to or 0. At that point, y'all, when everything's on one side, you can hit it with the quad. Oh, I think this one won't be too bad to factor, so here we go. And I'll just set them equal to 0. So I got x and an x. This time my last number is negative. Anytime the last number is negative, you got unlike signs on them factors. Now, the bigger factor will have the same sign as that middle number. And now, since the last number is negative, you want factors of 16. That'll subtract and get me a 6. And that'd be 8 and 2. So the 8's bigger, it's going to be positive like the 6. And the 2 will be negative. All right, we set all these equal to 0 so we can get these answers. You know, the first one we'll subtract a, and I get x equals a negative 8. Second one, I'm going to add 2 and get x is a positive 2. So now let me set up my line here. Let's say I got negative 8 and 2, so negative 8 will be first, and then 2 will be my second one. So 0 is in between that negative 8 and 2 this time. So I'm going to test my 0 again. So here's what's nice about that. You can use the original equation, or you can use the equation where we got everything on one side. I'm probably going to use the one where I got everything on one side. So that's going to give me a 0 squared plus 6 times 0 minus 16 has to be greater than or equal to 0. So let's say I got a bunch of zeros. So basically I need to know, is negative 16 greater than or equal to 0? That is definitely false. So we're not going to shade where the 0 is. We're going to shade the outsides. And I'll tell you, I always use 0, but you can use any number on here you want to. If you want to use a 1 or anything like that, you can plug 1s in. Although I think they're more work on those. 0 just destroys everything but that last number. So basically, you need to know the last number greater than 0, true or false, okay? All right, interval notation. Also notice, I have an equals under this one. So I will use brackets. So my interval is going to go from negative infinity to negative 8 with a bracket. And then we're union around that bracket, we're going to go from 2 to a positive infinity. And be done. Okay? And none of you won't keep, they're just, what part they're going to mess with y'all on is that equation. Okay? And I think this one is x squared greater than 9. So this is my number 4. X squared greater than 9. So I'm not going to lie, this was the one that if I wanted to solve it a different way, at that point I just got to take the square roots of both sides and I can solve that. So you could end with square roots. Now, I'll just do it like I've been doing these. I'm going to get a 0 over here by subtracting 9. So I basically got an x squared minus 9 greater than 0. So let me put over here what I would do if this was a quad and I wanted to use quad on it. I would have a 1 for my A, my B would be a 0, and my C would be a negative 9. So really, whatever term is missing has to be a 0 when you use quad, okay? All right, but guess what? This thing will factor. X and the X. Last number is negative, so one's positive, one's negative. How about this? How about factors of 9 that'll equal 0? 3, right? 3 minus 3 is be 0. So that means I get a plus 3 and a -3. And I'll tell you a trick. On this one, whatever the square root of 9 is going to be what your numbers is. Or y'all probably get a 16 would be a 4 and a 4, 25 would be a 5 and a 5, and so on, okay? All right, so let's get these answers. So -3, so I get an x equals a -3. Then I'm going to add 3 and get x is a +3. So I know what to put on the intervals now. So I got a -3 here and a +3 there, which means 0, once again, is right in the middle. So y'all can use either one of these equations. Well, I'm not using my top one. I got 0 squared has to be greater than 9. Is that true or false? That's definitely false. So I will not shade where my 0 was. I'm going to shade the outsides. So the outsides will be the left and then the right. Now, y'all, you don't have to draw the line 2 or 3 times like I'm doing. I'll probably use my same line and shade on it and everything. Only reason I'm doing that is so that they can sort of follow me through what I'm doing, I guess you might say. And there's no equals on this, so we got to use curvy parentheses. So we're going to go from -infinity to -3, curvy parentheses, union, curvy parentheses from 3 to +infinity. And like I said on this one, if you graphed it, this from -3 to 3 would be under the x-axis. Everything else would be above it, okay? To me, this is almost like doing 7.5 again when y'all had to do all the finding the zeros and quadratic formula stuff. I guess if you want to use quadratic formula by hand, you can also do that on these, but whoo, that's probably the longest method, ain't it? All right, let me try this one. 25 minus x squared is less than or equal to 0. So let me tell you what I'm going to do to that. I'm going to rearrange it. I don't like my x squareds being last, and I don't like them being negative. So first of all, I'm going to rearrange it so I get a -x squared plus 25 less than or equal to 0. So y'all, I don't like the x squared being negative. So to change that sign, I'm going to divide everybody by -1. Now, there's one thing I got to do when I divide by that negative. I got to change my inequality around. So instead of being less than or equal, it's now going to be greater than or equal. So just remember that when you switch them signs, you got to flip it around, okay? So then I get a positive x squared minus 25 greater than or equal to 0. And doing that, when you do that to everything, you don't change the value of your equation, you're just changing the way it looks. But hey, on that x squared minus 25 looks just like this x squared minus 9 I had over here, right? The only difference is it's a 25 instead of a 9. So I'm going to factor that. And it's already going to be what, x plus 5, x minus 5. So those, we call them x squared minus 25, x squared minus 9s. Those are called the difference of perfect squares. So to solve those, square root that 25 like he did, get them 5s. Then I'll just finish the rest of it doing like we did on the 3s. I'm going to get a -5 and a +5. So let's make that number line. Over here will be -5, and there will be my +5. And what I like about these perfect squares, the number's always in the middle. That 0, okay? So 0, once again, is going to be in the middle. So, yeah, you can even use this one. You would have 25 minus 0 squared is less than or equal to 0. Or you could have used this one where we flipped it. But in both cases, that thing's going to be false. So see, if this was 25 less than 0, it's false, right? If you put the 0 in this one, -25 greater than 0, that's false. So no matter which equation you're going to use, it's going to be false in the middle. So since it's false where the 0 was, we're going to shade the outsides. Outsides on this one. Now, had that thing been less than, it would have been in the middle, and then if that one would have been greater than, it would have been in the middle, okay? Do y'all remember when y'all doing the transformations on the graphs, and the x squared term was negative, it flipped the parabola over, okay? That's sort of happening on this one. This is an upside down parabola. But what that interval is going to be pretty much like this, except for them parentheses, right? I got equals on that, so they're going to be brackets. So I go from -infinity to -5 bracket, union, bracket, from 5 positive infinity. And I think that's why I like doing all these with y'all. So y'all remember them tricks about flipping that little inequality around? Now let's see what they did next. So notice they've already went out of order on me with this one. The next one is sort of out of order again. 10x minus 25 minus x squared is going to be less than 0. So y'all, first thing I'm going to do is rearrange that. I want that x squared first, then the x, then the number. So it's going to give me a -x squared plus the 10x minus 25 is less than 0. So just curious, what do y'all think I'm going to do next to that? I'm going to divide that -1 because I want that x squared term to be positive again. So divide everybody by -1. Which means I'm going to flip my little inequality around. So it's now going to be a greater than 0 over my, all that -1 doing is change all signs. So the x squared is now positive. 10x will be negative. 25 will be positive. And it's all greater than my 0. At that point, have fun with the quad. But let's see if we can factor it. So I got an x and an x. Last one's positive, so both of these will be negative like the middle. So let's see what I need on this one is my factors of 25. That'll add to get 10. Oh. So a 5 and a 5. That means I got one of those repeating factors. So when you got a repeating factor, you're only going to take one of them, set it equal to 0. We're going to solve that in by, what, adding 5 to both sides? So so that we get x is a positive 5. So remember, star number 1 said if we had a repeating answer, it only got one solution, that's the only number I'm kicking out of my whole domain. So your domain will start at negative infinity. It's going to go hit that 5. Then we're going to union around that 5 until we hit positive infinity. So y'all be careful. Y'all's number 6 is going to be really similar to my 6. Instead of 10 and 25, it might be 12 and 36, 14 and 49, or something like that, okay? So that's the case of the repeating factor. Then I had one more star, if you remember. So this one, y'all, has an x squared plus an 8 is less than 4x. I'm gonna hang on a second, let y'all get caught up with me. I gotta take a drink. Whew, I'm sweating so bad in this, man. Y'all go get a shot for me. We won't be wearing masks next week. Send y'all down to Dickie Stevens or somewhere like that and get a big old shot clinic. All right, so on that one, I'm going to get that 4x, move to the other side. And it's going to go right in between that x squared and that 8. So we get an x squared minus 4x plus 8. That's going to be less than 0. Now, if you wanted that point, quad would be 1, negative 4, 8, and move on, okay? So we're going to try to factor it because we've been doing that on every one of these. So I've got an x and an x. What's these two signs going to be? Yeah, both of these going to be negative. So all I need are factors of 8 that'll add and get me a 4. You finding anything? I ain't finding anything. We ain't got 2 guesses, I guess. 1 and 8, that ain't working. 2 and 4, that ain't working. So guess what? This does not factor. So it is a no solution. You got your calculator out. Let's just push it in on quad and see what it would actually say on that one. So you're already on quad. So I want to hit it. I had a 1, negative 4, and an 8. So see how few imaginary answers on that? Anything like that? We can't make a timeline with imaginary numbers and stuff. So what that means when it's got imaginary zeros is it don't cross the x-axis at all. So that's why we get a no solution on that, okay? All these other ones at these points, that's where they're crossing the x-axis at. Although this one, since it's only got 1 point, it's not crossing it. What this one's going to do over here at 5 is the graph just sort of comes down and touches it there. But since it don't have equals on it, that's why that's kicked out of that domain. Because it wouldn't be greater than, it would be equal to it, being on the line. So that's why we exclude that one number and move on. So any of those, though, y'all can graph them and sort of get a picture of what you got going on. So questions on this? This ain't too bad. I think both y'all are pretty caught up on my homework. You must have been somewhere, I don't know, that you got caught up pretty good. Oh, you went back over there the other night? Okay, so Richard and Jeffrey are good. Is that what you see? Oh, they good. Mm-hmm. So that's good then, because that's good. I need you caught up. That way next week, all you're doing, after we review, you're ready for your test. You ain't trying to catch up homework and then doing that test. I sent y'all a bonus last night for test 3 bonus. It's like finding zeros of 3 problems. So to find a zero is basically quad formula or something like that. I didn't get real deep. I just did 3 simple ones. Well, some of them might be imaginary, but still, you can quad them all if you want. I just do stuff like that so y'all get more practice for these tests. All right, so y'all, that's it for test 3 material. So we'll shut her down. I'll review Monday. So what I'm going to focus on my review Monday, there's 25 questions on your study guide review. My test only has 20 on it, so I'm going to focus on the 20 that are on my test. Now, I will send out a study guide thing if you want to get 100 on that quiz or whatever. I'll send out one that actually has all 25 on it. But in class, I'll probably just focus on the 20 you need to know for my test. And that way y'all can get better on that. Now, I took out some of them crazy questions they had, where they had to ask you for like 10 different things, you know, for one question. I was like, no, don't want that on there, you know. So your review will probably be harder than your test, for sure, okay? All righty, so I'm going to end this and I'll get this sent out for y'all. Oh, let me get one more. Mariana came in. And then Monica and Yolanda. All right, so I got all y'all.